Choose a different surname or die. Brewed in Scotland, bottled in Ulster, and uncorked in America. The migration of the Scots have a rich history, and it has significantly shaped the cultural landscape of our region. Let me point out some key migrations because of a pivotal event in our history. Number 1. The Plantation of Ulster, 1610 to 1630. During this period, the English crown encouraged the settlement of Protestant, Scottish, and English settlers in Ulster. The goal was to establish a loyal Protestant presence in a predominantly Catholic region. As a result, many Scots migrated to Ulster during the early 17th century. Number 2. The Ulster linen industry. By the 1700s, Ulster had become a hub for linen production. Tenant farmers and skilled weavers from Scotland and England settled in counties like Antrim, Down, Armagh, and Derry. They brought their expertise in flax cultivation and linen weaving, which became a major export activity. The demand for fine linen from Ulster led the trade with the American colonies, particularly Pennsylvania. Number 3. The Scottish-Irish migration to America. Around 1718, the Reverend James MacGregor organized about 120 families from Antrim and Londonderry to set sail for America. They arrived in Boston between August and September of that year. These settlers, often referred to as Scots-Irish, were primarily Presbyterian and of Scottish ancestry. They played a significant role in shaping the American frontier. Number 4. The Clan MacGregor. The MacGregors, a Highland clan, faced prosecution in Scotland. They were described as the unhappy race, involved in outlawry, theft, and oppression. Many members of the clan sought refuge in Ulster during the 1600s and 1700s, contributing to the region's diverse population. No matter how they started, their origins did not keep them from being prosecuted, hunted like dogs, and executed just for using the name MacGregor. Where the problems began. Over 1,200 years ago, while tradition holds to the idea that Gregor, the son of Kenneth MacAlpine, was the first chief, others claims have it that Clan MacGregor descended from the abbots of Glendochart, a royal Celtic line. Clan MacGregor claims royal descendant of Alpine MacAssey, king of the Scots from the year 787. Alpine's eldest son Kenneth became the first king of Scots and Picts in the year of 844. His third son, Gregor MacAlpine, is held to be the progenitor of the MacGregor clan. The clan's chief's motto, "My race is royal," records this tradition. Clan Alpine were descendants of Scot marauders from Ulster, who settled in western Caledonian Highlands in the early centuries of the Christian era. The Scots were Gaelic-speaking people who lived in Northern Ireland in pre-Christian times. They were farmers and fishermen, growing oats, barley, and wheat, keeping cattle and sheep, and fish from curragh, a skin-covered wooden frame boat still used by fishermen off the west coast of Ireland. In those times, land was the only form of capital, while cattle were both an investment and a main source of income. Consequently, land and cattle were greatly coveted for the major cause of strife. younger sons and other landless men raided neighboring Caledonia and Roman Britain in search of land to occupy, or booty which they could trade for land or cattle near home. Northern Britain or Caledonia was inhabited by people the Romans called Picts, because they painted their faces and bodies before going into battle. Western Britain, as far north as the River Clyde, was inhabited by Welsh-speaking Britons, who gave their name to Cumbria and Cumberland. After the withdrawal of the Roman garrison in Britain in the 5th century, the northern Welsh formed themselves into the kingdom of Strathclyde. About the dawn of the first Christian millennium, the Scots invaded the Western Isles, Lewis, Harris, and Skye, and the Western Highlands in some force, and eventually carved out a kingdom for themselves. And about the same time, Norwegians and Danes were raiding Caledonia, Strathclyde, and Ireland, and establishing earldoms in the Western Isles and in Ireland. They founded the trading towns of Dublin, Waterford, Westford, and Limerick. Angels from what today is known as Friesland were settling in northeast of Britain, between the Tyne and the Forth. The northern form of their English language is now known as Scots, which is confusing since the Scots of old spoke Gaelic. In 844, Kenneth MacAlpine succeeded in uniting the monarchs of Dalriada and Caledonia to become the first King of Scots and Picts. His heirs and successors extended their rule to include the Welsh of Strathclyde and the English-speaking lowlanders. They established their suzerainty over North lordships in the Isles, but they did not succeed in stopping the continuing struggle for land and power among the rival Gaelic-speaking clans. According to tradition, MacGregor was the third son of Alpine MacAussie and the younger brother of Kenneth MacAlpine. He succeeded his brother as King of Picts and Scots in 882, and he ruled until 897. It was his heir son, Dungal, who gave the patronym to his descendants. The records of the family of Gregor, on which this history is based, list Gregor, that died 897, King of the Scots and Picts, as the founder of the clan. At all events, the MacGregors and the McKinnons of Lewis and the number of other clans from the Western Highlands all claim kinship to Clan Alpine. The MacGregors held land on the eastern border of Argyll and the western border of Perthshire, including Glenarchy and Glenstreet. Glenarchy was granted to the MacGregors by King Alexander II for their support in the conquest of Argyll. They held their lands by the right of the sword, making no effort to obtain legal title, and this led eventually to conflict with their neighbors and to attempt to displace them. The MacGregors retaliated, and the constant conflict earned them the reputation for being a turbulent clan. The Campbells took advantage of the turmoil and obtained legal grants from the king in Edinburgh to the MacGregor land at Glenarchy. The MacGregors, however, still asserted their ancient rights to the land, beginning a long feud with the Campbells that lasted into the 18th century. Robbed of their ancestral lands, the MacGregors moved eastward into Perthshire, settling as tenants of rival chiefs. The scattered MacGregor clans recognized no authority other than that of their own chief, and showed little regard for the property of their neighbors. Many of them went in for cattle rustling. A few took to outright banditry. Greg MacGregor, the 10th chief, waged a private war against Campbell of Glenarchy, who had acquired the MacGregor lands at Glenstrait. Throughout the 1560s, the MacGregors hired and harassed Campbells until in 1570 Campbell captured him and had him beheaded. In 1589, MacGregor clansmen murdered John Drummond, the king's forester, who had hung some MacGregors for poaching deer. MacGregors plundered their neighbors and were prosecuted by them in return. The Scottish government, manipulated by powerful landowners, was not prepared to acknowledge that the MacGregors had a genuine grievance, one that had been created 200 years before the kings granted genealogy to the Campbells instead of recognizing the MacGregors' unwritten title to their land by ancient occupation. Surname MacGregor banned. In 1603, the Battle of Glenflurn left at least 140 men dead and led to an unparalleled punishment against the MacGregors. Their name banned in Scotland for a total of 150 years. The battle was supposedly fought against their neighbors, the Calhouns. The two clans had a bad history. Clan MacGregor, which was stripped of much of its land by Robert the Bruce, frequently raided their neighbors' property. Tradition dictates that the battle was sparked after two MacGregor men were refused shelter on Calhoun land and resorted to sleeping in an outhouse and slaughtered a sheep. After being discovered by the Lord Alas, they were sentenced to death, with their kinship mobilizing in furious response. Some believe this version of events, others argue that the Battle of Glenflurn began with just another MacGregor raid. Similar plundering expeditions were launched in weeks with two Calhoun men allegedly at Glenflurns a couple of months before. The difference was that on February 7th of 1603, the Calhouns were ready to protect themselves, with permission granted by James VI to pursue their foe. The Calhoun ranks were swollen by men from Dumbarton and Carros, with the clan marching into Glen with many as 500 men on foot and 300 on horseback. Clan MacGregor had around 350 men ready to fight and showed no mercy to their foes. Unfortunately for the Calhouns, the second part of the MacGregors' force was lying in wait for them. The MacGregors launched a downhill attack on the Calhouns, which drove them back in the direction hence they had come. 40 of the Calhouns and their alliances were killed, although some accounts have put the number as high as 200. The MacGregors took 80 horses, 600 cows, and 800 sheep. Following the bloodshed, James VI, in a bid to dismantle the clan, forced MacGregor and Gregors to drop their name or risk punishment by death. A royal warrant was signed by James VI on February 24, 1603, accusing the MacGregors of attacking members of Clan Calhoun at Glenflurn. Without pity or compassion or regard for young or old, the deeds were barbarous and horrible, with this wicked and unhappy race to be exterminated or rooted out. Less than 2 months later, around April 3rd, James VI ruled the name MacGregor should be altogether abolished, and that all people of the clan should renounce their name and take another, under the pain of death. Around a year later, Alistair of Glenstrait were hung at the Mercat Cross in Edinburgh, with the leader hoisted above his men before being drawn and quartered. The MacGregor name was restored in 1661 by Charles II, but disallowed once more in 1693 by William of Orange. It was not until 1784 way after Claudin, that the MacGregors were allowed to resume their own name and was restored to all the rights and privileges of British citizens. A memorial stone stand in Glenfern to mark the Calhoun that died. End of an era, but for the next half-century the MacGregors lived as outlaws. The men hunted down and slaughtered, and the women branded on their faces. During the religious conflict of the 17th century, the MacGregors took the side of the Stuart kings against the fundamentalists. They were rewarded by King Charles II with the repeal of the punitive law against them. In the Revolution of 1688, the clan rallied to the cause of the exiled King James II. But this turned into their disadvantage when the victorious William of Orange reintroduced the legislation suppressing Clan MacGregor. An unbreakable spirit. The laws against Clan MacGregor were eventually repealed in 1774, but many of those who had adopted prosymonyms continued to use them, which is why Clan MacGregor has such an extraordinary number of different surnames, such as Magaha, and many others where the former MacGregors have attached themselves to other clans or families. How does all this affect our family lines? Well, here's how. Patrick MacGregor, born around 1581 in Melrose, Scotland, also known as the third chief of the Children of the Mist, played a significant role in Clan MacGregor's history and left a lasting legacy. The MacGregors were known for their resilience and resourcefulness, especially during challenging times. This branch of the clan led a wild and hunted existence in the Misty Mountains. His leadership was marked by both courage and cunning as he navigated the complexity of clan rivalries and allegiances. Patrick married Marion MacDonald of Glencoe. Marion belonged to the powerful MacDonald family, specifically the MacDonalds of Glencoe. She is a distant relative of the MacDonalds of Seat. Tyler Magaha descends from them. 10 times great-grandparents of my son. Patrick and Marion MacGregor had several children, including 2 notable sons. Ian MacGregor, he became Patrick's heir and continued the MacGregor line, and another son is also historically part of this family nucleus. 9 times great-grandfather James MacGregor, born 1618 and died 1675. Known as the colonist, to avoid prosecution, he changed his name to William Magahi, also spelled Magahi. He migrated to Virginia, and in Virginia met Mary Johnson. They had 5 children together. And if you are interested in seeing the full line of descent, I did make that available to you in the blog at scorecustom.com/puzzle of origins. Visit us today. Check out this blog and see all the information I provided. There are more interesting facts there. Next goal, DNA testing on Barry. I plan to tell the true story through Barry's Y-DNA and see if his matches confirm the well-researched documentation on these family members. I want to see if the DNA trail matches the many trees that claim this descendants. Records from these early days are sparse and open to various interpretations. Births and deaths were not recorded, the only evidence of a man's existence often being an oral tradition preserved through his family down through the generations. or his mention in some legal documentation. Tombstones are another source of evidence, the lines of descent being deduced from a patronym recorded to part of a man's name and title. Some of the early church registers of baptisms and burials have survived, but these often list only names and dates, leaving family connections to guesswork. The line of descent from Gregor, King of the Picts and Scots, to Gregor MacGregor of Glenlyon is open to considerable debate, dependent as it is on tradition, guesswork, and wishful thinking. But with more people learning how to record their DNA, I know we can piece this puzzle together. The lies of the past are no longer our future truths. While researching, I uncovered I am a distant cousin of my husband through this line. We trace back to Scotland and share several common ancestors that has had a major influence on each other's lives. But that is a tale I will share another day. Clan MacGregor's history left a lasting legacy. Tyler's legacy. From past to present, an enduring, unbreakable spirit passed down through many generations. The descendants of these early immigrants continue to celebrate their heritage and cultural contributions. The stories told reflects the intertwining of Scotland and Irish heritage, family bonds, and the challenges of a new beginning.